In this lesson, you'll learn how to write angles and also know the definitions and postulates concerning angles. So let's begin by getting a definition of the word angle itself. So an angle is a figure formed by two rays with a common endpoint. So for example, we see here we have one ray starting at point A going through point C. Now A is the endpoint, so if there's another ray that has the same or the common endpoint as point A, then we're going to have an angle. So another ray with that common endpoint will look something like this, where both ray AC and ray AB both have that common endpoint of point A. So we see here this would be an angle. So the two rays are called the sides. So we see here this would be a side. This would be another side of the angle. And then this point right here, there's a term for that common endpoint, and that is called the vertex. So make sure you know the term angle, the definition, as well as the components of the angle. Now, as far as naming angles are concerned, we will use the 3 points that are in the angle. So it does not matter the order necessarily. The only thing that matters is that the vertex, this point A in this case, is in the center. So I'm going to use all 3 points. So we're going to use points C, A, and B, but A needs to be in the middle. This here is going to be your vertex. It does not matter the order in the sense that B and C can be switched. We can have angle BAC as well. And then take note of the angle symbol here at the beginning. So the angle symbol is simply drawing an angle in front. And if you've noticed, it's kind of like that with all the shapes so far that we've done. Right, a line, you draw a line above it to represent a line. So for example, line AB, you draw a line above it, and that means line AB. For a segment AB, we draw a line segment above the points or the letters A and B. Same thing with angle, we just draw an angle next to it to show that it's an angle, and then put the letters in there. So it's kind of self-explanatory. Just take note, though, that the A, the vertex, goes in the center. Now there's types of angles that we need to discuss as well. So these types of angles here are based off the size. So an acute angle, by definition, has a measure between 0 and 90 degrees. So for example, something like this. This would be an example of an acute angle. And the way to remember this is maybe an acute angle. Acute, if you see something that's actually cute, usually it's maybe something small, like maybe a kitten or a puppy. Something that is cute is many times small. So acute angle is a small angle where it's between 0 and 90 degrees. A right angle has exactly 90 degrees, and that's this angle right there. So this angle, a right angle, looks like an L, and that is maybe a way to remember that. So a right angle has exactly 90 degrees. An obtuse angle has between 90 and 180 degrees. So an angle like this. And obtuse looks kind of like the word obese, and obese means large. So an obtuse angle would be a large angle, where it's bigger than 90 degrees. And the last one is called a straight angle, where the measure is exactly 180 degrees. And that is something along these lines. So a straight angle would create a line. And so we see that a line would have 180 degrees. Okay, so make sure you know those 4 types of angles. There's some other terms to know as well, and that is the term congruent angles, and that is simply angles with equal measures. And we've seen the word congruent already, and we're going to see this all throughout the course, where congruent can be applied to any shape. So we've seen it with congruent segments. Here we now see it with angles. So an example would be these 2 angles right there. They are congruent because they're exactly the same measure. Okay, so angles are congruent if the measure is the same. So let's say this is 30 degrees. Okay, and then this one over here is also 30 degrees. Those would be congruent because the measure is the same. Another term is the term adjacent angles. the term or the word adjacent in the English language simply means next to. So adjacent angles are angles that are next to each other. And more specifically, they share a vertex and a side. So for example, we see right here, angle AOB, this angle right there, AOB, it shares a vertex and a side with angle BOC, this angle right here. Okay, so they are what we call adjacent because they're touching or they're next to each other. Some more terms to know is what we call an angle bisector. So an angle bisector would be something where the ray, segment, line, or plane divides an angle into two congruent adjacent angles. Okay, so we see an example right here where you have an angle AOC, is being cut in half by this ray OB. It's cut in half, as we see, because the measures are the same, where this is 60 and this is 60. So because ray OB is creating two congruent adjacent angles, we say that ray OB is going to be the angle bisector. Some other types of angles to know are what we call complementary angles. And these are angles that total 90 degrees. So notice the difference between this and right angles. Right angles would be just one angle that is 90 degrees, whereas a complementary angle are going to be two angles that add up to be 90 degrees. So we see here this angle plus this angle equals 90. So these two angles are what we call complementary angles because they add up to be 90 degrees. Whereas supplementary is another type of angle, and those are two angles that total 180 degrees. So for example, we see here this angle is 130, and then this angle over here is 50. So if we add 130 plus 50 together, we get 180. So these two angles put together, we say are supplementary angles. So notice the difference once again here between a straight angle. Straight angle is just one angle, that's 180 degrees. Whereas supplementary angles are two angles that total 180 when you add them together. Here we see an example of a word problem that we can use these definitions to solve. So we see here that an angle is 42 degrees. The question is to find the complement and the supplement. Or another way of wording this would be find the complementary angle and the supplementary angle. Well, the complement, we said, is an angle that adds up with another angle to be 90 degrees. So two angles are complementary if they add up to 90. So to find the complement, we need to find what angle is added to the 42 degree angle to give me 90 degrees. So 42 degrees plus something gives me 90. So if we subtract 90 minus 42, that's going to give me our solution. So your complement, the measure of the complement is going to be 48 degrees. And then to find the supplement, or the measure of the supplementary angle, we know that two supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So to find the measure of the supplement, we know that 42 degrees plus something gives me 180 degrees. Well, what is that something? Well, I can find that by taking 180 minus 42, and that's going to give me 138 degrees. And now as we wrap up this lesson, we have one final term to know, and that is what's called the angle addition postulate. Now remember, the term postulate simply means something that does not need to be proved. It is a statement of fact. So angle addition postulate, what this says is that if we have point B, so here we see point B, lies in the interior of angle AOC, so here we see angle AOC, then the measure of AOB, so this angle right here, AOB, plus measure of angle BOC, so this angle right here, that's going to add up to equal the measure of the big angle AOC. Now this, maybe not does not seem too obvious or too intuitive, but if we put actual numbers in here, it's going to make much more sense. Where let's say measure of angle AOB is, say, 50 degrees. And then we have the measure of angle BOC, this angle, let's say that is 70 degrees. And the question is, what is the measure of the big angle, angle AOC? Well, if I take the 50 degrees, add that with the 70 degrees, that's going to give me the bigger angle measure of angle AOC. So if I take 50 plus 70, I'm going to get 120 degrees. So this angle right here, angle AOC, the big angle, the measure is going to be 120 degrees. And that is the concept of the angle addition postulate. So all the math notation and the definition is kind of confusing, but make sure you know more so how to use it as opposed to the, I guess, the nuance, the definition with all the math notation. But do take note, one little side note here, this M in the front of each of these, all that means is the measure of the angle. So if that M was not there, we'd just be talking about the shape angle AOB. But I'm not concerned about the shape necessarily, but I'm concerned about the size of the shape, or the measure of the angle. So the M signifies the measure. So the measure of angle AOB was 50 degrees, and the measure of angle BOC was 70. So the measure of the entire angle, AOC, would be 120 degrees. And that concludes our lesson for today, and we will see you next time.